Hello again. Today I am delighted to be able to take a closer look at the 1/6 scale 4th Doctor figure from Big Chief Studios. Now I should point out that this is actually a reissue of a previously released figure from Big Chief, except this time it's come through Zavvi. And this reissue is something of a budget release, although the price is pretty much the same as the original release, but of course time has moved on and so have prices. But it is essentially a stripped down version of the figure that was released a good few years ago. Now, for those who are curious and missed out on the original release, you can see in the image on screen all the little extras that came with the original release that unfortunately we don't get this time around. First up is that fantastic diorama piece, that card inlay that serves as a TARDIS console, nice little backdrop for your 1/6 figure. Don't get that this time around, which is a real shame, but also you'll see there's some key accessories as well. For a start, the sheer number of extra hands that he has here has been really pared down this time around, and he's limited on the accessories as well. So obviously what you can see here, you can see the Hand of Fear, you can see the Key to Time, and a yo-yo. Sadly, none of these pieces were included in this stripped down release, but we did get a few of these extras, so it's not all bad news. So let's start off by taking a look at this packaging. As we can see, it's a little bit bland. It's quite flat in terms of its imagery. There's not really a lot going on here. It's mostly just a deep dark blue, navy blue colour, which is quite nice on the eye, but it's quite simplistic, quite basic. We can see some Gallifreyan markings on it, which is quite nice. And of course, in the centre of the packaging, we have this cutout, and we can see an image of a portrait of the action figure, which is quite nicely done. I quite like the contrast between the purple and the blue. That really stands out. That's a nice touch, but otherwise there's not really an awful lot going on here. This packaging in itself isn't particularly exciting or displayable, but it's absolutely fine. I'm afraid the side panel doesn't really do much to excite or inflame either. It's fairly bland and nondescript. It would have been nice if they'd used the side panel to put an image of the 4th Doctor, either the figure or just a still of Tom Baker would have been quite nice. To stack these up with other figures in a series on the shelf would have looked quite attractive. As it is, it's just fairly nondescript really. This could be any character in a Doctor Who box, but it's absolutely fine, but it's just not special. Also, I don't know about you, but it really bugs me that we have the modern Doctor Who logo on this packaging, because obviously Doctor Who logos come and go. They usually change with each era when we have a new Doctor or a new showrunner. So this obviously is about to move into history very shortly anyway, and it just seems a shame. I think would have been a better approach would have been to have actually used the logo from that Doctor from that time. That would have been really fun. So yeah, this feels like it will date quite quickly. Now, the reverse of the packaging is quite unusual for any 1/6 scale figure because it shows off other figures in this series that you can buy. All of the Doctors that you can see here, the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th, are all available for reissue through Zavvi. They're all pared down, bare bones releases, but for collectors like myself who missed out on these figures the first time around, and boy, when these guys disappear, they soon appreciate in value on the secondary market and they become quite difficult to track down, then you will really appreciate having a second chance to pick these guys up, even if they're not in the most complete or most deluxe format as they were originally. And in terms of this packaging, I actually think this brightens things up considerably, makes it a lot more attractive actually. It's really nice to see all 5 of these Doctors on the back of this box, each having their own distinct colour: purple, yellow, blue, green, red. I think this is quite colourful, quite attractive, it's fairly displayable, and there's a nice little bit of bio about each one as well. So this is actually quite fun and unexpected. Now, one criticism I will level at this packaging is that it does feel quite cheap. It is certainly bare bones. Inside we had this inlay, this slide here where we can see this image of Tom Baker, and it lists what he comes with, his various accessories, but it is just one piece of card that slides inside the packaging. Underneath, of course, we can see the figure, but even the case that this figure is held in is almost paper thin. It is card, but it's very, very flimsy card, and it doesn't feel particularly robust. So this does feel very much like they've cut a few corners here. So once we've opened this guy up, what does he look like? How does he stand up? Well, pretty well, to be honest. I have to say, I'm really quite impressed with this guy, mainly for his costume and his colouring. But first things first, let's talk about this head sculpt. I actually think this head sculpt is really, really nice. I think they've done an absolutely fantastic job capturing the likeness of Tom Baker. This is really sharp. You can see the details in the eyes, the nose, particularly under the eyes there and around the lips as well. And of course, the hair. I think they've done a really solid job of capturing the essence of this character and really bringing it to life. I think they've done a really nice job with this all in all. Now, if we take a photo of an in-hand image of the original release, we can see that there's some striking differences in the paint apps between the two releases, the original and this reissue, most noticeably around the face. When it comes to those paint apps around the face there, we can see that the original release has this sort of 5 o'clock shadow that is, it's a little bit distracting, it's just a little bit off kilter, it distracts a little bit, and it's just not quite right. There's just something about it that's a bit off-putting somehow. I really feel that this reissue is really good though, because they fixed that, and I feel like there's none of that shading around the face there, so it just looks spot on. And this is a much cleaner version, I suppose, a brighter colour palette, which just works so well. And I have to say, I think for my money, this is actually the superior head sculpt. So although the sculpt is exactly the same, the paint apps are much better applied here. We do only get one head, one sculpt in this package. However, we are fortunate enough to be able to swap out the hairline to actually have the hat as well, which is very cool. So we have two very distinctively different looks for this character, which is brilliant. I really love the addition of this hat head sculpt. I think this is absolutely brilliant. It just slides off nice and easily, so you can either have the hair or the hair with the hat, which is fantastic. So yeah, this looks great. I really like this. I think the sculpting of it is really nicely done. A nice touch that I think is particularly impressive is the ribbon around the hat. This is a real ribbon, so it has a nice texture to it, gives it a little bit more depth, and I just think this looks really good. Of the two looks, this is my personal favourite. This feels the most distinctively like the Fourth Doctor, so I really like this. When I'm putting him on display, this is the version I'm going to have, but of course that's entirely up to you, but very nice that we have both options. One thing I was slightly disappointed by though was his scarf. Certainly it has the length, which is fantastic. It's a fairly interesting material. Obviously the original scarf was like very thick wool. This is a very thin cotton, so it doesn't look quite right, doesn't have the right texture, but also it just feels far too bright and the colours don't seem quite accurate to me. So they're more of a pastel, whereas the original scarf seems a lot more deeper, darker colours. So I'm a little bit disappointed by this. It's absolutely fine. I've no problems with it. It still looks really good, and I always think brightness on a toy is a real plus. So it's certainly visually it stands out, but it's not quite accurate to what we see on screen. That being said, I do quite like the tassels at the end of the scarf. They're independently sewed in, so this is a nice texture. It's a little bit different to the rest of the material used in this figure and the costume. So I think this looks quite nice. This is quite effective. The frock coat isn't quite accurate either. If we look at this colour in here, we can see it's quite a strong, vibrant, vivid burgundy, whereas in the show it's a much darker shade. It's almost brown on screen, so this isn't quite accurate. It's a little bit too bright for my liking. The material itself is quite thin as well, although it does have a sort of felt texture, which is quite nice. The overall silhouette and cut is pretty accurate. I think they've done a really nice job of it all in all, although you will notice with mine the lapels are kind of creased in the wrong places, so it's not quite the way it should look, but that might just be a quirk of mine. If we open up though, we can see this fantastic silk inlining, which is very nice. I love this purple there, and I think this is really colourful and really very attractive. Now, sadly and quite surprisingly, the pockets on the exterior are false pockets. They have a lip, but they have actual no pocket there, and that's really disappointing because it would have been really nice to store some of his accessories like the sonic screwdriver in here like he does in the show. But I did want to point out some of the nice finer details we can see around the cuffs there, and in particular those buttons being sewn on. This is a really nice look, and I think they've done a nice job of capturing the little details. And speaking of attention to detail, I really love what they've done with the waistcoat, the collar and the cravat there. I think this is an absolute fantastic job here. We can see that this is very screen accurate. I really love the colouring and the pattern designs on that waistcoat. If we open that up, we can see there's even braces underneath, which is really cool. I never even realised that Tom Baker actually had braces underneath that waistcoat, so I think that's a lovely little detail that is really fun and very nicely executed. As I said, that tie there, again, is kind of a slightly silky material. It works really well. It looks exactly perfect to what we see on the show. So all in all, I really love the tailoring here. I think they've done a fantastic job of it, and it's a lot of fun to look at when it's on display. I also really like his trousers. I love the material I've used for this. This feels very textured. It's very thick cotton. Feels just like they look, if that makes any sense. But yeah, they're really rich, very thick material. And fantastically, these do have working pockets, which is brilliant. So top marks for this. And we can see, of course, he has these sculpted brogues as well. These look really nice, nicely sculpted, beautifully painted as well. We can see the fine detail in there, which is brilliant. The laces and, of course, the various bits and pieces. And if we roll his trouser leg up, we can see he's also wearing socks. So I don't think we could really ask for much more here. And whilst we're looking at the base, he does also come with his own display stand. It is fairly generic. It could be for any Doctor Who character. It's in that sort of octagonal shape, which is quite nice. It's a little bit bland. Again, it is using the modern Doctor Who logo, and it's a real shame because I just wish it had been specific to the 70s era logo, but never mind. But one of the things I really like about Big Chief Studios is the fact that they put LEDs in their display stand. So there is a little switch when you pop that on, of course the logo lights up. And I think this is a cool, fun, little extra touch that makes all the difference. So I really like this, and I'm really glad that they bothered to make this effort. As I mentioned at the top of the video, this is a pared down release, so sadly we don't get as many accessories as we did in the first release, but we do get a few key ones, and I think the best in my opinion. So we get an extra pair of hands, which is pretty good. He's going to need these to grip some of his accessories. He comes with some jelly babies, and of course his sonic screwdriver. I'm not entirely convinced that these extra hands were maybe the best ones for this particular release. If we look at this hand here, it does clearly struggle to hold the sonic screwdriver, and none of the hands seem able to hold the jelly babies at all. The other major gripe I have is that one of these snapped more or less straight away, which is really frustrating when I was trying to swap the hands out. As you can see, it's snapped off right inside there, so that hand is pretty much defunct. And yeah, these are very tight. These are very difficult to swap the hands. I'm very nervous about swapping these out, so I'm probably just going to stick with the ones that I have now. But yeah, just be forewarned, this wasn't brilliant, and I was a little bit concerned about the quality control here. I've had other figures from Big Chief with no problems, but this one wasn't so good. Otherwise though, what we have is pretty decent. I particularly like this open palm hand. I think this works quite well when he holds it up like this. I think that's a very nice look. We see that in the show, which is pretty cool. The other hand had the pointed finger, so he can kind of put it to his lips as if he's shushing his companion. So it's unfortunate I can't demo that, but that is quite a nice look. I've seen that demoed in other production photos, which is pretty decent. I'm not quite sure how I feel about the hand that grips the sonic screwdriver. Yeah, it looks pretty decent like this. The actual grip on it itself is a little bit odd. It doesn't feel like it's a very natural tight grip, like, you know, that's how it's meant to be. I kind of had to persevere with it, and it's a little bit strange. I had to kind of put it at an odd angle to get it to kind of hold its position. Like I said, it looks great here, but I don't know if it's quite right. And I've already mentioned that the jelly babies don't really work with any of these hands, to be honest. Here I'm really letting gravity do the work with the open palm, because it's not a snug fit at all. These keep falling out of his hand. They're quite unreliable and quite temperamental, so you can kind of just about get it to work, but it's going to be hit and miss, and the slightest nudge and they're going to fall straight out of that grip. And as I said, they don't really work with any of the hands in particular, so that's a real shame that we don't have a especially crafted, sculpted hand that can comfortably hold these quite snugly and firmly. Before I wrap up though, I should talk about the articulation. Of course, he does have that fantastic ball joint in the neck and the head, which is great, so he can turn his head from side to side, he can lean his head from side to side, and of course he can look up and down a really huge distance, and that's because that neck joint goes right the way into the chest, and it's absolutely fantastic. So there's no problems here with the head movement whatsoever. Of course, he's got ball joints in the chest, and I think there's a pivot joint in the upper shoulder area as well that allows the arms to really kick forwards and back and up and down, which is fantastic. Pretty sure there's an upper bicep swivel there as well. And then of course we have double jointed elbows, so they go all the way back there, so he can of course touch his hat if he needs to, which is fantastic stuff. And then there is a ball joint in the wrist there, so of course that wrist spins 360 degrees and it hinges forwards and backwards as well. Now, there is articulation in the torso. I'm pretty sure it's there, but I can't get it to work for love nor money. It feels very stiff and a bit fragile. I just have too many fears that it's going to snap. It just doesn't feel quite right. It's just a lot of resistance there, but I'm sure the articulation's there. It's just not having it for whatever reason. Now he's got the ball joints in the legs, so there's no problems kicking the legs out. I feel as if there is an upper thigh swivel, but again, I couldn't get it to budge, and I couldn't even get the legs to kick forwards or backwards. Now the articulation must be there, but my word, there is heavy resistance to being able to get these forwards, and I just was not going to push it. He does have double jointed knees, which obviously kick all the way back, which is fantastic. And then of course we can see there's another ball joint in the ankle there, so those shoes hinge from side to side and forwards and backwards as well. Okay then, final thoughts. Well, I have to say, I absolutely love this figure actually, and I'm surprised because there's a lot of things about it that should really put me off it. I'm not hugely impressed with the joints snapping. That was really frustrating, and I can assure you that the air was blue when that happened. I was not happy at all with that. So that was very frustrating. I think there's certain inaccuracies, the scarf and the shading of the frock coat there as well, and I'm not being able to get the most out of the articulation with the legs moving forwards, for example. There's a lot of things there that I should really hurt my feelings towards this figure, and yet somehow I still love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think the colouring is actually brilliant. I love that it's bright and vivid. I love that we have screen accurate details in the rest of the costuming. I think that's lovely little details like the braces and the tie and the waistcoat, all fantastic. And I love that there's a wealth of different materials being used for the costume as well. It feels very textured. It feels pretty authentic in the main, which is lovely. I do really like the accessories, particularly that sonic screwdriver. I think that is perfectly sculpted and painted. I love that, and I'm pleased that he can pretty much hold it, which is good. I love the extra head. When I say extra head, of course I mean the choice between having the hair and the hat. I think that works really well, and I think the head sculpt is brilliant, and the paint apps are perfect. I really love how they've tidied it up this time around, so it actually really works. They've made the most of this sculpt this time around thanks to those paint apps. So yeah, it's a strange one. I should feel a little bit frustrated by this release. Normally I would be very critical, but there's something so pleasing about the overall presentation, having this figure on display, that it just really works for me. So I can actually forgive it all its flaws and actually say that I think it's pretty magnificent all in all. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.